Welcome back, revolutionaries. And let's get to our interview today with Lakshmi Rengarajan, who is a leading researcher on dating and the host of the Later Dater Today podcast, speaker, and her crossover work in the dating industry to how and why we work hired her to focus on relationships at work. Welcome, Lakshmi.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. I'm excited. Can you let's start off with how did you start on this path to help shaping the dating culture by mapping out the timelines of people who met in person and make sure I have that right versus people who meet online?
Yeah, I mean, I think just like you and what you were referring to, like I think a lot of us sort of had that pit in our stomach maybe about 10 to 15 years ago, like, wow, some of this stuff that's coming out is really cool. And there's probably going to be some not so great stuff too, and kind of wanting to pay attention to that. So I remember I was working in an ad agency and people were dating online, but the dating apps hadn't quite come out. But you could see that what you could see is that people seem to have a lot less patience for each other when they were dating. People, for example,
Online or in person?
online, right? So they would
Okay.
meet people online and they would sort of make judgments very quickly. And didn't see anything like necessarily, I didn't think people shouldn't date online. It was more just one of those things where I was like, wow, we're kind of losing that thing that happens when you kind of get to know people over time.
Yeah.
And people wanted to make decisions about whether or not they liked someone in a moment is what I was starting to see. And so I started designing events and experiences to get people off of online dating, and then ended up going to Match because they saw what I was doing and they thought it was really interesting. And then we work.
When you said you ended up going, you ended up working at Match,
I ended up
correct?
working at Match.com.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. I think like the relationship changes were being very evident. I mean, I think if you talk to anybody, they'll talk about kind of who they were 10 years ago and some of the reflexes and muscles that they had and how those have slowly changed over time and the effects of the pandemic. And so kind of what I do is I was looking at it very specifically through dating and then very specifically through the lens of work. So that's sort of the crossover that you alluded to.
Yeah, and I'm more intrigued with it as a customer and employee experience consultant and as an employer of three companies, and we have so many, different generations. It's fun. I heard you say that the side of women, and I don't know, maybe this is women only, but the side of women who shop online is the same one that comes out in online dating. Can you explain that to our listeners?
Yeah, and I definitely wasn't just saying women. I was saying
Okay.
people.
My bad. My bad.
That's okay. No, it's just like it's an important distinction. Yeah. So the that when we're on these platforms, and I think we can think about any platform that we're on, we are shaped by the user experience. I mean, it's called user experience for a reason, right? Like we're
Yeah.
bringing ourselves, but they're also eliciting a side of ourselves. And I think we know that from any interaction that we have. So it's like if you think about the screen or the app as like a person, that person impacts how you behave and what side of you comes out. And so a lot of how dating apps are, I mean, they're very much designed by like e-commerce principles. And so naturally, the side of you that's going to come out is going to be sort of more of the customer side of you than maybe some of the other sides of you.
Which means what? So like when I'm scanning through TikTok, I'll see an interview with a young woman, and a young woman could be 35 or younger, right? And the person saying, what's the demographics that she's looking for? What's the, least amount of money, you want a man to, make for you to, go out with them? She might say 100, 120.
Yeah.
Some other things, but, height, 6 feet or 6'1" or a taller. And I forget what the third thing might have been. And he said to her, "Do you know what the percentage?" And obviously single. I'm pretty sure that was a requirement.
Yeah.
And he said to her, "What do you think the percentage of men out there is?" And she said, "Probably 40." And he said, "Less than 4." And I don't think people realize. But that got me thinking. So I go to my girlfriend and said, if I if you were on a dating app and you came across me and I was relatively honest about my height, never been, never, ever, ever been honest with anyone, right? But anyway, I was relatively honest about my height. Would you swipe right on me? And she thought about it and she said no. I'm like, and see, that's the thing I worry about, especially the younger generation, is when I was in my 20s, which I think is our most formative people skill, social skills, and all that. I needed charm and my humor to get someone to give me 10 more seconds or a second chance versus not having that. So what's your take on all that?
So I think what you're pointing out is very much aligned with what I'm saying. So when you're referring to this video, that person's talking to a woman about their idealized state,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
you could have asked the same question to a man and you would have probably gotten
Right. Right. Right.
similar, right? And I think that's important. Like everyone's kind of coming in with um, this idealized version. And what I know from studying relationships for so long is people actually aren't as stringent about those things as you might assume.
When you meet in person, I assume.
When you meet in person or when you meet over time or when you, most importantly, when you meet in context,
Right.
right? So
But if you
context.
just have the option to swipe right or swipe left, you're going to do it kind of, I think what you were referring to is materialistically, right?
I think you're going not necessarily materialistically, but you're going over a very, very tiny sliver of information.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. That's
Yeah.
sort of like the point. And different, one day you could be, superficial in one way, and one way you could be superficial in another way. I think what I'm sort of trying to bring to light is people are making very, they're making decisions about who someone is in a split second. And that is how it is designed.
Right.
And all I'm saying is that is part of who you are. It's just not all of who you are.
Right. Right. Right.
Right.
Right.
And we don't have as many places that are cultivating the other sides of you and the other sides of other people is what I'm trying to say.